everyone, it's Tori and welcome to the Crafty Girl. Today's video is by overwhelming request. We are going to talk about panels. If you like this type of content, don't forget to like and subscribe. You can also support the channel by joining and becoming a member, or you can even buy me a cup of coffee and just click the super thanks down below. But without further ado, let's just dive right in to the knitting machine and making panels. So if you're familiar with circular knitting machines at all, you know that there are tips and tricks and ways to make the machine work for you. Typically, if you're brand new with a knitting machine, you start with tubes, because tubes, once you master that, then you can move on to kind of the more advanced, well, I think it's more advanced, option of making panels. Now, once you open up the world of panels, now there are so many more things available to you, so many different projects. As someone who focuses primarily on clothing items, panels are absolutely necessary. Wow, words are not coming today. Absolutely necessary for the projects that I create. Now, if you're not familiar, this is the circular knitting machine. I'm actually going to use a Centro 48 for this project. We are going to be using, I'm going to be making a camisole, just a simple camisole. Just because it's going to be a quick project to make, and I can show you very easily how to do the actual process of panels. I'm also going to be using this camisole as part of a two-piece set for an upcoming video where I'm going to be making a cuffed scarf. And so what that means is it's a scarf that's like really, really long, wraps around, and then it has cuffs for your sleeves, and then the camisole I'm going to wear underneath it. So stay tuned for that video coming up shortly. But this is our circular knitting machine. As I said, Centro 48. Over here on the right-hand side, there is, and I'll lift this up a little so you can see if you haven't seen this before, there is an option for tube or panel setting, and we have it turned to panel. So that is going to be your first step, is going to be turning this to the panel setting. Also, before you even dive into this, know that, I'm not sure with Addie, but I know with Centro, the counter, if your counter still works, by the way, mine is on the fritz, but the counter will not work. So before you even jump into using the panel setting, I would certainly recommend getting something like this. This is just a little digital counter. You can find these at pretty much any craft stores out there, and it just lets you keep track. You can also just use a piece of paper. I always have a piece of paper handy because my brain is all over the place and I need to make notes all the time. So just make sure you have that available just so that you can make notes. So with that, let's take a look at what differentiates a tube from a panel. So a tube, you're going to be knitting in the round. So you're going to go all the way around and you're going to create that tube like this. You can fold it in half and you can create kind of panels with it. You can use it for all different things, but it does get pretty bulky. And when it comes to spring and summer, you don't want to make any camisoles or tank tops or lightweight items that have that double layer. That's just going to get a little warm. So tubes are going to be out and panels are going to be in. So with a panel, what happens is that the machine is actually going to stop you. So you'll see here that if you crank to the side, it won't go any further. Do not force it. You'll break your machine. And then if we crank to the other side, it'll stop here. Now, this is where I think a lot of people get confused, because when you go to cast on, it's going to be similar, but a little bit different. The questions that tend to happen are, well, where do I even start? Which ones don't catch? How many pins? Do I use waste yarn? These are all questions that you have sent me. Now, first thing I want to talk to you about is marking your pins. Now, I know this isn't for everybody, but I will tell you, for me, this is a game changer. And you'll see that I've marked some around, and that's when I do like braiding projects. I need to have my pins marked for drop stitches, that kind of thing. And this over here is no different. So my first pin, the first white pin, okay, this is actually the last pin in the row. So there are 48 pins on this machine. This is pin number 48. And I have this one clearly marked just because as you go around, it really alerts you that you're coming up on the last pin. So that, no matter what, you should have that one marked. These two I also have marked because these are the 3 pins when you do a panel setting that will not get used. And this is where I think that it's going to help so immensely if you just mark these pins before you start so you know which ones that you're not going to cast on with. So make sure you do that so you get your last pin, you get the next pin and the next pin. So total, you'll have 45, 46, 47, 48, yeah, 45 pins, or 45 rows that you will be able to make. You can make this even smaller. So you don't have to do, you know, from this pin to this pin, or 45 rows if you're working on panels. You can make really tiny pins, or really tiny panels, which might actually be good for making your own faux I-cord, or making straps, or making like a band if you wanted to make a band. So there are lots of ways that you can play around with this and customize it with panels. So as I mentioned, I really recommend marking these three right here. All right, let's talk about casting on. So now that we have our machine clearly labeled, it will make things easier. Now, the other question you might have is, which side should you cast on? Cast on? Yes. It's really up to you, but I will tell you, for me, I find it easiest to cast on the left-hand side. And yes, I did just cut my finger, so apologies for that distracting Band-Aid. So I find it easiest for me to cast on the left-hand side because, again, since these are clearly marked, I know that I'm not going to cast on with this needle right here. It doesn't make sense because it won't catch and it won't knit. So instead, I'm going to come over here, right? So here's this last one marked, and I'm going to cast on this one right here and go all the way around just like you would with a tube. So in front, behind, and so forth. Now, if you accidentally, okay, so let's say, again, I always want to show you what happens. If you accidentally cast on these two right here, what'll happen is they just won't knit and you'll be able to pull them out later. So have I done that? Of course I've done that. So it's not the end of the world. But we are going to cast on with our waist yarn. And remember, I am using waist yarn. So the question on, do you use waist yarn? Absolutely. So we're going to go in front, behind, in front, behind, in front, behind. Make sure you do not miss any until we get all the way to the other side. Okay, now we're coming back up on the end. Now, this black little bumper right here, this should be your signifier that this is the last pin that is going to knit. So what this should tell you in your brain is that you need to make sure that this goes under this bump. Has to go under this bump right here, okay? And then we're gonna put it in our yarn feeder. Now that we've done that, we can go back the other direction, but before you do that, I wanna show you. So tension is the most important thing when it comes to panels, especially on the beginning and end. So on these two sides right here, if you do not have proper tension, that's where you're going to get a lot of drop stitches and it's just going to get really frustrating. So I'm going to actually tug on this just a little bit and I'm going to go back. Okay, right there we go. And then I'm going to continue to the other side. And yes, I'm holding it. You could put it in the tensioner if you want to. In fact, maybe I should so that I can get a better grip on this. All right, now we're coming back up on the other side. So now what we need to do is, again, this one, and this one. So these three pins will not get knitted. So what we need to do is make sure that this one right here that does not have a mark on it, okay, that this, you can keep going to the right, but that it pops under the bumper. Now that it's under there, you're holding it and you're pulling it to give it extra tension. Do not yank on it. This is just to make sure that it goes around that bumper. Okay, it pops under just like that, and then we're going to continue. And I'm going to put it in the feeder now. Okay, now when we get back to this side, this is something that will probably happen and you do need to be aware of. Do you see how on this pin right here, it's kind of falling off? It looks like it might be trapped under there. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that it's pushed all the way down. There we go. So we need to make sure that that loop is all the way down here. Okay, and then we're gonna hold on and add extra tension as we get to the end. And we're gonna make, this is the one you're looking at, we're gonna make sure that yarn goes under the bumper. Now you don't need to go any further. Holding on to the yarn again and giving it extra tension, we're going to go back the other direction. But again, you do need to make sure that that loop is down. Now the yarn's going to go under that one, and then we're going to continue. Okay, we're going to get back and see again, it's getting stuck on here, so you just want to make sure that it goes all the way down. Get under that bumper right there, and then continue. So you're really, the success that comes from panels really has to do with just making sure that your beginning and ending loops, okay, those beginning and ending loops are not falling off and not dropping stitches. Now I can already tell right here that something happened and my loop went under there. This is the waist yarn, so I'm not too concerned, but you definitely need to keep an eyeball on that. So let's go back around a couple of rounds, make sure that's under and give it tension, and I can let go of that tension. Okay, when I get back now, okay, I can make sure that loop pops down. Okay, so you want to make sure you have the loop all the way down. We're going to go until we get under there, give it another tug, make sure it's down, and then go back. Now I'm going to do a little extra with waist yarn on this, just since we're in a rhythm. That way I can show you. Again, make sure that it's down. Go there. Now I'm going to do some at regular speed just so you can see. Let's just do 2 rows at regular speed. Okay, so now we have some waist yarn on here. I always do a ravel cord. A ravel cord, if you are not familiar, is just one single row of a contrasting color on the bottom. And what that does with your bottom waist yarn is it gives you an easy way just to remove one piece of yarn, and then the waist yarn will fall off. And I use this with almost all of my tubes when I use waist yarn, and I absolutely use it with panels as well. Because when I haven't, I've had to cut off my waist yarn, and what a waste that is. So just gonna cut your yarn. Now, just like when you're switching out yarn in a tube, it's the same process, okay? You're just gonna drop the current one. We're going back this direction. And then we are going to take the new piece of yarn, holding on to the end of the other one, making sure this one's down, and then giving it that extra tension. And then going under there. And then I'm going to pop that in there. Okay, that's adding waist yarn. Now it's time to add the working yarn, and guess what? The process is exactly the same. So I'm gonna take my working yarn, I'm gonna make this white camisole here, put it through my yarn guide, and then in the tensioner. And then I'm going to hold on to this piece here. I'm totally lying. We're going the opposite direction. So I'm going to hold on to this piece, although that's not the one we want it to be under, although it doesn't matter. So in fact, I'll show you. Going under this one, it's not going to be the end of the world. It's not going to knit, but we do want to make sure we're under that one. And then giving it tension because we want it to go under there. There we go. Now we're going to continue. And because we're doing a color change and a yarn change, just make sure that all of your yarn loops are down, especially the first and second time you go through. to prevent any drop stitches. Now, one other tip I want to tell you, when you are working with panels, because so many things can go wrong with drop stitches on the ends, with drop stitches in the project itself, make sure that you are using yarn that you are comfortable with, yarn that you know your machine loves, that you know it's not going to like all of a sudden seize up and stop working. So just ensure that you are using really good yarn when you're first starting out, so you don't have to worry about those other issues that can happen when you're working with unfamiliar yarn. All right, so here we are. We're back at that end right here. And like I said, if you accidentally go over, it just doesn't knit. So that's just from the previous row. So we are going to make sure we need to get under that bumper right there. Under that bumper, give it a tug so you have tension. Make sure that's, you know, down right there. And now we're going to continue. Oh, and I need to keep track of my rows. Okay, let's reset. Let's see. I just did 1, 2. Okay, and I need to keep track because I am making 2 panels and I need them to be the exact same size so that this top works out. Okay, so we did, wait, did we do 2 already? Or did we, oh my goodness. See, this is, I only did 1. So when we get to the end of this, it'll be 2. Okay, and remember, we did this one, we didn't have to go under there. It just didn't knit. It's fine. It's just loose. It's not the end of the world. But we are going to need to make sure we go behind that till it pops in. Give it a little bit of a tug, a little tension, make sure that's down, and then keep going. Oh, that's 3. Okay. So that is all there is. Now I know we're going to go through and I'm going to show you how to cast off and a couple other things. But another question that comes up is, can you do yarn changes midway through? Because absolutely, you may be working, maybe you run out of yarn, maybe you want to do stripes or color changes or whatever you want to do. Absolutely. It's exactly the same as with a tube. So here we are. We just finished this row here. I went all the way over. Yes. And then let's say we're going here and we need to do a color change here. Just snip your yarn, put it in the center, put the new piece there, and keep going. Make sure that you tie it in that knot. And then when you take your work off, you will need to make sure that you are doing a full knot, the double knot there. It is a little more complicated with hiding your yarn tails because now you just have the flat panel, so you can't hide them between the 2 little pieces there. But you can weave them in and out with a little more effort and then hide them as well. So I'm going to knit my rows and then we'll come back together when we are ready to cast off. Here we are at the end of my rows. I'm the worst at keeping track of panels. That's kind of like my big downfall. So I typically just measure, but I do think that I went about 66 rows. So I will say about 66 rows. Again, I'm making this a camisole. So all I'm trying to do is get from the top of my bust to like my belly button area, 2 of these, and then I'm going to attach them on the sides and then do little spaghetti straps. So I'm going to just do a quick little measurement just so I can show you. I'm trying not to pull the yarn because I want to get a true measurement here. And we are about at 12 inches. If I don't pull, if I stretch it a little bit, it's probably going to be more like 13 inches, and that's okay. So we are ready to cast off, and casting off again is not scary. Cutting the yarn always is. It's the same thing we did when we added our waste yarn. So we're going to put that piece of yarn there. And again, I'm going to do waste yarn. If you weren't doing waste yarn, all you would need to do is just crank around 1 time to release all the stitches and then go in and pick them up with your darning needle. Since I am not doing that, we are going to add our little yarn to the yarn guide. And again, these 2 don't matter. They're not going to be knitted. We're just trying to get this. Move my hand out of the way. We're just wanting to make sure that we get the yarn under there. And then again, same thing that we've done each time, making sure that that's popped all the way down. go to right behind there under the bump, pull it a little bit, and go back. Make sure that's down. Oh. Yarn everywhere. Okay, now before I do the final crank around and get it to fall off, I did want to show you how pretty these ends are. So this is, again, another complaint when you're doing panels, that you might get really funky ends. It's all about tension. And as I pointed out, just making sure that you are keeping even tension throughout, except when you're on those ends. Make sure to give a little extra tug so that it looks just like this. And now we are ready. I'm just gonna pop that in there. I'm gonna go around. Another little tip for you, if you don't wanna crank back and forth, you could just put it on panel mode or tube mode right now. In fact, I'll show you. You could just put it on tube mode and then just keep going all the way around. So it's totally up to you, but I'm gonna forget to put it back on panel, so I'm gonna need to make sure to do that right now. There we go. All right, and there is our first panel. Now, yes, my tension got a little funky. I can tell right here, and I knew it exactly because I was using a center pull and it got stuck. So I knew that was going to be a little wonky, but that'll just be the back of it. And now it's time to make our second panel. So that is it. That is all there is to making panels. Nothing to be scared of. If you have any other questions, just let me know. I will show you the final reveal of the camisole and the scarf with cuffs in the future video. But let me know if you have any other questions or if you have tips yourself, because that's the thing. I'm always learning. I just teach you what I learn, and I would love to hear from all of you. So that is it for today. Hopefully this was helpful, and have fun out there making your panels. And until next time, everybody, see ya!